Nothing can hurt you anymore. Carl Jung. What if the people hurting you were never the real problem? What if the real battle has always been inside your own mind, and today is the day you finally take back control? Part 1. The Storm Within. Why the world doesn't hurt you. Your mind does. Have you ever wondered why some people seem unaffected by chaos, while others fall apart over the smallest things? One person might lose their job, face betrayal, or suffer illness, yet still walks through life with quiet strength. Another person might spiral just because someone didn't return a text message. What separates them? Most people believe it's willpower, genetics, or just being born strong. But the truth is far more revealing and far more liberating. It has nothing to do with pretending to be positive or suppressing your emotions. In fact, the opposite is true. The key to becoming unshakable lies in your willingness to really feel and transform the way you relate to what's happening inside you. The root of suffering isn't pain. It's resistance to pain. We've been conditioned to think that negative emotions are problems to be solved, symptoms to be medicated, or weaknesses to be overcome. But what if sadness wasn't a problem? What if fear wasn't the enemy? What if anger wasn't something to be ashamed of, but a signal that your boundaries have been crossed? Carl Jung, one of the most profound voices in depth psychology, once said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." That means the more you try to bury your emotions, the more power they gain. They don't disappear, they take over. And here's the most shocking part. It's not the world that makes you miserable. It's the way you've been trained to interpret the world. Think of your mind as a lens like tinted glasses. Every thought, every experience, every emotion you have passes through that lens. And if the lens is fogged up with fear, guilt, shame, or resentment, then everything you see will be colored by those filters. It's not that life is terrible. It's that your inner programming keeps replaying the same painful story over and over again. Let me give you a real-world example. Imagine someone insults you at work. Maybe they say something passive-aggressive during a meeting or criticize your performance in front of your boss. Most people would immediately feel defensive or crushed. But pause and ask what really caused that reaction. Was it their words, or was it the insecurity inside you that those words poked at? That moment of pause is where freedom begins. You see, most of us live in reaction mode. Something happens, we feel an emotion, and we react automatically, blindly, habitually. We yell, we cry, we withdraw. But what if you stop before the reaction? What if, instead of jumping into the emotion, you took a breath and asked, what part of me is being triggered right now? That's when you step into what Jung called the conscious observer, the part of you that isn't caught up in the emotion, but watches it unfold. And from that place, you realize something life-changing. Your suffering doesn't come from the event. It comes from the meaning you assign to it. This isn't about blaming yourself. This is about reclaiming power. Let's go deeper. Have you ever replayed a moment in your head over and over again? Maybe it was a breakup, a betrayal, or something someone said to you years ago. You think, why can't I move on? Why does it still hurt? Here's why your mind turned that moment into a story. And that story became part of your identity. I'm not lovable. I can't trust people. I always get overlooked. Once you've internalized that narrative, your brain starts looking for proof. Every new experience gets filtered through that same lens, confirming the same old belief. This is what Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So how do you change it? You don't fight the emotion. You don't try to kill the story. You become aware of it. You bring it into the light. You stop blaming others for the way you feel and start taking radical responsibility for your inner world. That's not easy. It takes courage to look at your emotional wounds. But healing doesn't happen by running away. It happens by going inward. Think of it like this. Your emotions are messengers. Sadness isn't just bad. It often means there's something you need to let go of, an expectation, a relationship, a version of yourself that's no longer true. Fear isn't weakness. It's often a sign that you're stepping out of your comfort zone and your old identity is freaking out. Anger isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's your soul screaming that you've been silent too long. Every emotion is a doorway if you're willing to open it. Now, let me tell you about a woman I worked with years ago. She had built her entire life around being the helper, always available, always putting others first. But inside, she was exhausted, resentful, and quietly angry. Every time someone asked her for a favor, she smiled and said yes, even when she wanted to scream. Why? Because she was terrified of being rejected. Somewhere in her childhood, she had learned that love had to be earned. That being needed meant being safe. So she wore the mask of the strong. Support a friend, even though it was killing her inside. When we started talking, she kept saying, "I don't want to feel this way anymore." I told her, "Then stop betraying yourself." The silence that followed was heavier than any words. We worked on her boundaries. We peeled back the layers of her story. She learned to sit with the discomfort of saying no, of not being liked, of not being perfect. And slowly, something beautiful began to emerge. Peace. Not the fake kind of peace that comes from being passive, but the deep, earned kind that comes from living in alignment with your truth. You want to know what it really means to be free? It's not never feeling pain. It's knowing that nothing and no one has the power to steal your peace unless you give them that power. And here's the catch: you've probably been giving that power away for years without even knowing it. The good news: you can take it back, starting right now. In the next section, we'll explore how to identify the exact beliefs that are sabotaging your inner peace and how to reprogram them from the root. But for now, I want you to sit with this question. What story have you been telling yourself that no longer serves you? You don't need to answer it right now. Just let it sit. Because sometimes, the first step into healing isn't changing, it's becoming aware. And when you become aware, the chains start to fall off one by one. Part 2, the story you tell yourself and how it becomes your prison. Have you ever stopped and asked yourself, why do I keep ending up in the same kind of pain? No matter how much I try to change, different people, different jobs, different situations, yet somehow, the same heartbreak, the same anxiety, the same feelings of not being enough. There's a reason for that. And it's not because the world is out to get you. It's because you're carrying an old script, a belief system so deeply ingrained in your unconscious that you don't even realize it's running your life. And until that script is rewritten, no matter how much you change your environment, the inner experience will stay the same. Let's go back to something Carl Jung said: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That quote isn't just poetic, it's a psychological roadmap. Your unconscious is like the operating system behind everything you do. It's been shaped by childhood memories, past traumas, cultural conditioning, and the voices of people you've trusted or feared along the way. The words your parents used, the way teachers responded to your mistakes, the look on someone's face when you shared something vulnerable. It all got stored, and it didn't just stay there, it grew roots. Over time, those roots created beliefs. I'm only worthy if I'm perfect. If I say no, people will abandon me. I have to prove myself to be loved. Oh, speaking up will only get me hurt. These beliefs become your internal compass even though they're broken. Here's the problem. Most people don't even realize they're living by these rules. They just feel anxiety, self-doubt, or emotional exhaustion and assume that's just life. They keep trying harder, pushing further, bending themselves into shapes that don't fit, hoping the world will finally reward them with love, success, or peace. But peace doesn't come from the world changing. Peace comes from waking up to the story you've been telling yourself and daring to write a new one. Let me tell you about a man I coached several years ago. Let's call him Brian. On the surface, he had it all: great job, big house, beautiful family. But inside, he was miserable, constantly anxious, quick to anger, exhausted by the feeling that nothing he did was ever good enough. When we dug deeper, it became clear Brian had grown up with a father who only showed affection when he achieved something, an A on a test, a championship win, some outward display of success. So as an adult, Brian never stopped performing. He was always on, always trying to earn love, always terrified of failure, not because failure itself was so bad, but because to him, failure meant rejection, and rejection felt like death. He wasn't chasing success. He was running from the feeling of being unworthy. You see, our deepest wounds often masquerade as ambition. When we finally confronted that belief, it shook him. For the first time in his life, he saw that all his achievements, his degrees, his promotions, even his social charm weren't built on joy. They were built on fear. So we went to work not on his resume, but on his roots. He began to challenge the story that love had to be earned. He practiced being still, even when it felt uncomfortable. He started saying, "I am enough," not as a cheesy affirmation, but as a defiant act of self-trust. And slowly, the walls began to come down. And that's what I want to offer you right now. The courage to examine the story that's been controlling your life from the shadows. Jung called this shadow integration. It's the process of turning toward the parts of ourselves we've denied, hidden, or labeled as shameful, not to indulge them, but to understand them. Because what we don't accept about ourselves controls us. Here's how it usually works. You feel triggered by someone, a partner, a friend, a coworker. Maybe they criticize you, or maybe they ignore you. And you feel this surge of emotion, defensiveness, anger, shame, panic. The reaction feels instant, involuntary, but it's not random. What's happening is your shadow has been touched. The shadow is that hidden part of your psyche where all your repressed emotions, unmet needs, and unresolved pain live. The things you've decided are unacceptable. The feelings you weren't allowed to express. The parts of you that got you hurt, rejected, or punished in the past. Maybe you were taught that being emotional was weak. So now you get angry at sensitive people because they remind you of the part of yourself you never got to honor. Maybe you were told to always be polite and agreeable. So now you secretly resent those who speak their minds. Maybe you were raised to put others first. So now you feel intense guilt anytime you assert your own needs. These triggers aren't accidents. They're invitations. Every trigger is your shadow asking to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be integrated. But most of us don't do that. We react. We project. We blame the other person for making us feel a certain way. We say, "They disrespected me," or "They're too needy," or "They don't get me." In reality, they just stepped on an old wound you haven't healed. The path to inner peace begins when you stop pointing the finger outward and start asking, why does this affect me so deeply? What part of me is being activated right now? It's not a comfortable question, but it's a powerful one. Once you start doing this consistently, everything begins to change. You stop taking things so personally. You stop needing others to behave a certain way just so you can feel okay. You stop outsourcing your worth to people who don't even understand your story. And here's something most people never realize: the moment you take full responsibility for your emotional world, you take your power back. Let me be clear. This doesn't mean blaming yourself for other people's actions. It means recognizing that your response is yours and it holds the key to your freedom. So how do we start to reprogram the beliefs that have kept us trapped? Step 1, awareness. You have to hear the voice before you can challenge it. That inner voice that says you're not enough, that says people are judging you, that tells you to play small or keep the peace. That voice isn't truth. It's a memory. It's programming. And you can change it. Step 2, curiosity. Instead of reacting with judgment, why am I like this? Approach yourself with curiosity. Where did I learn this? What was I trying to protect myself from? What would I believe instead if I weren't afraid? Step 3, rewriting. Every time the old voice shows up, don't fight it. Thank it. It's trying to protect you. Then offer it a new belief. Something like, I don't need to earn love, I am love. Or I'm safe to be seen. Or even just, I'm allowed to take up space. And no, this isn't about empty affirmations or toxic positivity. This is about creating a new neurological path, one that supports your truth instead of sabotaging it. You are not broken. You are conditioned. But now, you have the chance to become conscious, to choose a different path. Because the real power is not in controlling the world. It's in changing the way you relate to it, the way you relate to yourselves. In the next part, we'll go deeper into emotional mastery, how to ride the wave of your emotions without being pulled under, and how to finally stop being a prisoner of your past reactions. But for now, I want to leave you with this. Your life will begin to change the moment you realize you don't have to keep living the same story. You can write a new one, and it doesn't have to start someday. It can start right now. Part 3, the mastery of emotion, from reaction to conscious response. There's a moment, just a sliver of space that exists between stimulus and response. Something happens. Someone says something. You feel something inside you start to stir: anxiety, anger, shame, fear. In that split second, most people react instinctively, automatically, often destructively. But in that tiny space before you yell, shut down, apologize for existing, or try to make everyone happy, you have a choice. And that choice can change your life. The key to emotional freedom isn't to never feel. It's to never be ruled by what you feel. And let's be real, that's hard. Especially if you were raised in an environment where emotional regulation wasn't modeled, where anger meant danger, sadness was weakness, and silence was survival. Many of us were never taught how to sit with our feelings. We were only taught how to escape them. So we did. Through distraction, through workaholism, through perfectionism, through numbing. But here's the truth. What you avoid doesn't go away. It waits. It waits for the perfect moment to resurface, usually when you least expect it. A heated argument, a moment of rejection, a random comment that sends you spiraling. And suddenly, you're 5 years old again, feeling unworthy, invisible, or not good enough. So how do you stop letting emotions hijack your peace? First, let's stop demonizing emotion. Emotion is not your enemy. Emotion is data. It's a signal, a message from your unconscious that something inside you is calling out for attention. When you feel anger, your boundaries may have been crossed. When you feel sadness, something within you may need to be released. When you feel fear, it may be because your ego senses an identity threat, something unfamiliar, something uncertain. But most people never stop to ask, what is this emotion really trying to tell me? Instead, they react. And reaction is the language of the unconscious mind. It's a signal that you're not choosing your programmingism. Let me give you a real-life example. A man I worked with had always struggled with confrontation. Every time someone challenged him, he either shut down or lashed out. On the surface, it seemed like he had an anger issue. But when we dug deeper, we discovered something else. He was afraid, not of the person, but of being wrong. Because being wronged, to him, meant he might be humiliated or rejected. That fear didn't start in adulthood. It began when he was 7, constantly criticized by a father who saw any mistake as weakness. So as an adult, every time someone challenged him, it wasn't that moment he was responding to, it was that old wound. This is what I want you to understand most of the time. You're not reacting to the present. You're reacting to a memory, a wound, a subconscious narrative that's been quietly running the show for years. Carl Jung called this the complex, a cluster of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors built around an emotional experience that never got fully processed. And the only way to disarm a complex is to become aware of it, to bring it out of the shadow and into the light of consciousness. So the next time you feel emotionally triggered, try this. Pause, even just 3 seconds. Stop yourself before you react. Breathe. It sounds simple, but a deep breath interrupts the fight or flight response and brings you back to center. Identify, name the emotion. This is shame. This is fear. This is anger. 4. Inquire. Ask, what is this emotion trying to protect? What belief is it tied to? Is this reaction coming from the present or the past? Well, respond, not react. Choose a response that aligns with your conscious values, not your unconscious wounds. It's not about suppression. It's about redirection. Let's say you're in the middle of a tense argument with your partner. You feel disrespected. Your chest tightens. Your voice starts to rise. That's the old pattern kicking in. Defend. Protect. Overpower. But what if, instead of raising your voice, you paused and asked yourself, why does this feel so threatening? What story am I telling myself right now? Maybe it's, they don't value me. They're trying to control me. I'm being rejected. Now you're getting closer to the truth. Now you're inside the story, not just reacting to it. And this is where real emotional power begins. Because when you can observe your emotions without becoming them, you gain freedom. You stop being a slave to your triggers and start becoming a master of your state. This doesn't mean you'll never feel overwhelmed again. It means you won't get lost in it. Remember, emotions are like waves. They rise, they crash, they recede. The goal is not to stop the waves. It's to learn how to surf. One of my favorite metaphors is this. Imagine you're standing in the ocean, chest deep. A wave is coming toward you. You can do one of 3 things. You can try to stop the wave with your hands, which is pointless and exhausting. You can turn your back on the wave and let it slam you in the back. Or you can face the wave, dive underneath it, and come up on the other side. That's emotional mastery, not resistance, not avoidance, but conscious surrender. Now let's talk about a different kind of reaction, internal collapse. Some people don't lash out when triggered. They shut down. They go numb. They go quiet. They withdraw into themselves, into shame or fear, like a turtle retreating into its shell. This isn't weakness. It's a survival strategy, often rooted in childhood environments where expressing emotion wasn't safe, where silence became self-preservation. If this is you, I want you to know your silence made sense back then. It kept you safe, but it's not serving you now. Your task isn't to push through and force expression. Your task is to create inner safety so your nervous system knows it's okay to speak, to feel, to exist. Start with micro moments of expression. Say, I feel overwhelmed right now, even if your voice shakes. Journal your emotions. Speak them into a voice memo. Let your inner world know it doesn't have to hide anymore. Because here's the truth, healing doesn't happen through intellectual insight alone. It happens through embodied experience. You have to feel your way to freedom. Jung once said that feeling is the function of valuing. In other words, your emotions tell you what matters. If you feel angry, it's likely because something important to you was threatened. If you feel sad, it may be because you lost something meaningful. But if you ignore or dismiss those emotions, you lose access to your deepest values. Your feelings are not weaknesses. They are clues. They are compasses. They are the language of the soul. So the next time you feel triggered by someone, by something, by a passing comment or memory, don't suppress. Don't explode. Pause, breathe, witness, and ask, what is this showing me about myself? You'll be amazed at how much power you've been giving away simply by reacting to something that didn't deserve that much power in the first place. And the most beautiful part, when you stop reacting, the world around you starts to shift. People begin to respond to your grounded energy. Situations that once felt unbearable lose their grip. You begin to experience the kind of peace that isn't dependent on circumstances, but radiates from within. In the next part, we'll explore how these shifts in emotional response ripple out into your relationships and why reclaiming your internal state is the first step toward authentic connection with others. But for now, I'll leave you with this. You are not your triggers. You are not your wounds. You are the space in which all those things rise and you get to choose what stays. That is the beginning of mastery. That is the beginning of peace. Part 4, Redefining Relationships. How inner strength changes outer dynamics. What happens when you stop reacting from your wounds? When you stop handing out your emotional power like candy? When you finally understand that other people's behavior isn't a reflection of your worth, but of their own story? What happens is everything begins to change. The world doesn't change first. You do. And the ripple effect of that shift touches everything, especially your relationships. Most people don't realize how much of their relationship pain has nothing to do with the other person and everything to do with unconscious expectations, suppressed emotions, and outdated beliefs they've been dragging from one relationship to the next. Let's break this down. When you enter a relationship, whether romantic, professional, or familial, you're not coming in as a blank slate. You're bringing your entire emotional blueprint with you. That includes your unmet childhood needs, your beliefs about love, trust, and abandonment. Boy, your protective strategies like people-pleasing, avoidance, passive aggression, or control. So when someone triggers you, maybe your partner forgets to text back, or your boss criticizes your work, it's rarely just about that moment. It's about what that moment represents in your emotional system. That text becomes proof that you're unimportant. That criticism becomes evidence that you're never enough. You don't react to the event, you react to the interpretation. Carl Jung often spoke about the projection of the unconscious onto others. We project our inner world onto the people around us, especially in intimate relationships. That's why the people closest to us often trigger us the most. They reflect parts of ourselves we haven't yet made peace with. So what do? You stop trying to change other people and start healing your interpretation. Let me share a real story. A woman I worked with, we'll call her Elise, had a pattern of dating emotionally unavailable men. Every time a relationship ended, she would say, "Why does this always happen to me? I just want someone who's present." When we looked closer, we found something deeper. Elise had grown up in a home where emotional expression was discouraged. Her father was distant. Her mother kept the peace by staying silent. So Elise learned two things. Love means emotional distance. 2, if I express too much, I'll be rejected. So unconsciously, she kept choosing partners who felt familiar, not safe. Not healthy, but emotionally familiar. The breakthrough didn't come when she found the right person. It came when she finally admitted the truth. She was afraid of being seen. Because deep down, she believed that if someone saw the real her, they'd walk away. And here's the twist: when she began healing that fear, when she started choosing herself, her energy changed, her boundaries changed, her standards changed. And eventually, so did her relationships. You don't get what you want. You get what you believe you deserve. This is why self-awareness is the most important ingredient in every healthy relationship. Not communication, not compromise, not even chemistry. Awareness. Because once you're aware of your emotional patterns, you can stop repeating them. You can catch yourself in the moment and say, "This isn't about them. This is about something in me that hasn't healed yet." That's not weakness. That's power. Now let's talk about boundaries, because no conversation about relationships is complete without them. A lot of people think boundaries are about control. If I set this boundary, the other person will change. But that's not what boundaries are for. A boundary isn't about changing someone else. It's about communicating what you will or will not allow in your space. It's not a punishment, it's an act of self-respect. If you constantly feel drained, taken advantage of, or resentful in your relationships, chances are your boundaries are either weak or non-existent. And here's something important: boundaries aren't just verbal, they're energetic. People pick up on how you treat yourself. If you don't respect your time, they won't either. If you constantly override your needs to keep the peace, they'll keep asking. If you tolerate disrespect, whether it's subtle or loud, you're teaching them what's acceptable. But when you begin to show up differently, when your self-respect increases, your environment takes notice. Not everyone will like it. Some people will leave. That's okay. Let them. Because what's meant for your healed self will never require you to betray your truths. I worked with a man, we'll call him Andre, who had spent his whole life being the nice guy. Always agreeable. Always accommodating. Always putting others first. But underneath that was a deep fear. If I disappoint people, I'll be rejected. The turning point came when he finally said, I'm tired of abandoning myself to make others comfortable. He started saying no, not in anger, but with clarity. He stopped over-explaining. He stopped apologizing for having needs. And something incredible happened. He didn't lose everyone. He gained the right ones. People didn't love him less when he showed up with boundaries. They loved him better. That's the paradox of relationships. The more you shrink yourself to be loved, the more you attract relationships that require you to stay small. But the moment you take up space, authentically and unapologetically, you create space for real love to find you. And here's where it gets even deeper. Sometimes, when you start healing, people from your past will try to pull you back into the old version of yourself. Not because they're bad, but because they were comfortable with your old patterns. They knew how to handle your silence, your compliance, your people-pleasing. But now, you're not so easy to manipulate. You ask questions, you challenge patterns, you refuse to betray yourself. And that threatens the dynamics they were used to. Let it threaten them. Growth isn't about keeping everyone comfortable. It's about becoming so grounded in your truth that you'd rather lose someone than lose yourself again. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And it's from this clarity that real connection becomes possible. Because now, you're no longer relating from fear. You're relating from wholeness. You're not asking, will you complete me? You're asking, can we grow together? Without abandoning ourselves. That's love. That's partnership. That's friendship. That's authenticity. So let me leave you with this. The relationship you have with yourself sets the tone for every relationship in your life. If your internal dialogue is full of shame, self-doubt, and apology, your external relationships will mirror that. But if your inner voice is rooted in compassion, truth, and sovereignty, your outer world will rise to meet that frequency. In the next part, we'll go deeper into how your belief system shapes your entire reality and how to reprogram your subconscious to support a life of peace, clarity, and power. But for now, ask yourself this: what version of me have I been hiding to keep others comfortable? And what would it mean to let that version finally breathe? Part 5, Rewriting the Code. How to reprogram your mind for peace and power. If your entire reality is built on a story, then your mind is the author. And here's the question: who's been holding the pen? Was it your parents? A teacher who embarrassed you in front of the class? An ex who convinced you that you were too much or not enough? Was it a culture that told you your worth was tied to your productivity, your looks, your bank account? Chances are, the story of your life, the way you view yourself, your potential, and your place in the world was written long before you were conscious enough to question it. That's the blueprint. And unless you update that blueprint, you will keep living out the same patterns under a different disguise. Carl Jung warned us, every psychological problem is ultimately a matter of consciousness. Translation: your pain doesn't just come from what happened to you. It comes from not being aware of the impact it had and letting that impact become your identity. Let's break this down. Imagine your mind as a field. Every thought you have is a seed. The more you repeat that thought, the more you water it, and eventually, it becomes a tree. Some of us are walking around with forests of fear, shame, and self-doubt because those were the seeds we kept feeding, over and over, without realizing it. The worst part, most of those thoughts didn't even start with us. They were inherited, passed down, planted in us by someone else's pain. Let me tell you about a client I'll call Marcus. From a young age, Marcus had been told he was too sensitive. He cried easily. He felt deeply. And every time he showed emotion, he was met with disapproval. Man up, they said. Stop being dramatic. So what did he learn? He learned to shut down. He learned that feelings made him weak, that being seen meant being shamed, that vulnerability equaled danger. As an adult, Marcus was successful on the outside but numb on the inside. Relationships didn't last. Friendships felt shallow. He was constantly performing, disconnected from his own truth. Until one day, we cracked the code. He said something almost in passing. "I've never felt safe just being myself." And there it was, the root, the old story, the belief that who he was at his core was too much, and the only way to survive was to shrink. From that moment, Marcus began a new practice, giving himself permission to feel every day. No judgment, just presence. He started journaling, letting the emotion flow without censorship. He joined a men's group where vulnerability was honored, not mocked. He stopped apologizing for having a heart, and slowly, he reprogrammed the belief that had kept him locked up for decades. Now here's the science behind this transformation. Your subconscious mind, where 90% of your beliefs live, doesn't know the difference between a real experience and an imagined one. It only knows what it's repeated, which means you can rewire it. You don't do this through force. You do it through consistency. Let's say you've been telling yourself for years, "I'm not good enough." That thought has deep neural grooves in your brain. It's familiar, automatic, but you can create a new groove. Start by planting a new belief, not a toxic positive mantra, but a believable, empowering truths. Something like, "I'm learning to value myself more every day." Then act on it. Reinforce it. When you set a boundary, you confirm that belief. When you say no without guilt, you reinforce it. When you rest without needing to earn it, you deepen it. Reprogramming is not just repetition, it's experience. The mind learns through action. Every time you make a new choice, you send a signal, "This is who I am now." But don't expect your old programming to disappear overnight. Think of it like renovating the house. You've lived in the same building your whole life. It's familiar, even if it's falling apart. You know where everything is, even if it hurts to live there. Now, you're rebuilding. That takes effort, patience, courage. There will be days you want to run back to the old house because it's easier to be miserable in the familiar than brave in the unknown. But if you keep going, something incredible happens. The foundation settles, the walls get stronger, the new version of you starts to feel like home. And here's the most powerful part. When your internal world shifts, your external world catches up. Let me say that again. When you change the way you see yourself, speak to yourself, and believe in yourself, life starts reflecting that change back at you. The same people who once ignored you start treating you with respect, or they disappear, making room for those who will. The same opportunities you once felt unworthy of begin to appear, and this time, you're ready to say yes. The same challenges that once crushed you now feel like stepping stones. You're not performing. You're not pretending. You're just aligned. Now let's talk about resistance, because it always shows up when change begins. There's a part of your psyche called the protector. Its job is to keep you safe. But its definition of safe isn't happy or fulfilled. It's familiar. So when you start doing new things, expressing needs, standing tall, setting boundaries, that protector goes into panic mode. It whispers, "Who do you think you are?" It tries to drag you back to the known, even if that known is pain. Don't fight it. Thank it. Say, "I know you're trying to protect me, but I don't need protection from my own truth anymore." That inner dialogue matters. Your subconscious is always listening. If you treat yourself like an enemy, your body will stay tense, your mind will stay guarded, and your heart will stay shut. But if you speak to yourself with compassion, something opens. You start to feel safe in your own skin. You start to feel peace, not as a reward, but as a default. You realize that healing was never about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. Let's get real. Your subconscious has been trained to expect pain. But what if, starting today, You trained it to expect peace, to expect safety, to expect love. Not because the world will always deliver it, but because you've stopped withholding it from yourself. In the next part, we'll explore individuation, what Jung called the process of becoming whole, and how facing your deepest fears leads to your highest freedom. But for now, let this settle in. You are not here to repeat your past. You are here to rewrite the story and reclaim the pen. Part 6, the return to wholeness, becoming who you truly are. There comes a moment, usually after the storm, when you realize something extraordinary. You've spent most of your life searching for peace outside of yourself, when it's been inside you all along. It wasn't hidden, it was buried, beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the shame, beneath the identities you created just to survive. But now, you've done the work. You've stopped blaming the world. You've stopped running from yourself. And now, you're ready to come home. Carl Jung called this journey individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not flawless, not liked by everyone, but whole. Wholeness means you no longer reject the parts of yourself that once felt unacceptable. You no longer wear a mask to gain approval. You don't shapeshift for belonging. You stop negotiating with your own soul. You stand in your truth not because it's easy, but because it's who you are. And here's the secret most people never learn: when you become whole, life stops being about chasing happiness. It becomes about embodying freedom. The freedom to feel without being ruled by feeling. The freedom to say no without guilt. The freedom to speak truth without fear of abandonment. The freedom to be silent without needing to explain. That freedom, true freedom, starts when you finally stop seeking permission to exist. So let me ask you something. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you beneath the survival role's caretaker, achiever, peacekeeper, perfectionist? Who are you when you're not trying to prove your worth? When the world is silent and there's nothing left to perform, what remains? Because that is your true self. And the journey of individuation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering what you were before the world told you who to be. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman I worked with, let's call her Naomi. She came to me after decades of burnout, decades of chasing success, sacrificing joy, making everyone else comfortable while silently falling apart inside. She'd built a life that looked perfect and felt like a prison. When I asked her, "When was the last time you felt free?" she started to cry, not because she had an answer, but because she didn't. Somewhere along the way, she had lost herself in the role of being enough. And no matter how much she gave, it was never enough for others or for herself. But over time, she began to remember. She remembered what made her laugh, not the polite, social laugh, but the kind that made her shoulders shake. She remembered how much she loved painting when no one was watching. She remembered how beautiful it felt to say, "I don't want to do that," and not justify it. She didn't burn her life down. She re-entered it, this time as herself. That's individuation. It doesn't require drama. It doesn't require walking away from everything. It simply requires returning to your essence, to your body, to your truth. But make no mistake, it takes courage, because there's grief in this process. Grief for the time you lost trying to please others. Grief for the parts of yourself you had to bury. Grief for the relationships that won't survive your growth. But there's also something else: rebirth. When you stop living for survival and start living for truth, the whole world opens. And not just the world around you, the world within you. You start hearing your own voice again, the one that was drowned out by expectations and fear. You start trusting your intuition. You realize that your sensitivity wasn't a flaw, it was a compass. That your breakdown wasn't weakness, it was a spiritual alarm. That your triggers weren't failures, they were invitations to come home to yourself. And when you come home, you no longer need to be fixed. You just need to be seen by yourself. Let's get honest, most people never get here. They spend their lives chasing distractions, chasing approval, chasing status, all while suppressing the quiet ache of disconnection inside. But you've chosen a different path. You've chosen to stop chasing and start integrating, to stop blaming and start becoming, to stop reacting and start responding. And that path, while harder, is also the one that leads to something no amount of money, success, or validation can offer: peace. The kind of peace that stays regardless of who leaves. The kind of peace that isn't dependent on external order, because it's rooted in internal alignment. And here's what you must know: peace isn't passive, it's powerful. Peace is the foundation from which you build boundaries. Peace is the strength that keeps you grounded when others project their chaos onto you. Peace is the clarity that lets you say yes to what aligns and walk away from what doesn't. That is what inner freedom looks like. Not the absence of emotion, but the presence of awareness. Not the disappearance of fear, but the deep knowing that fear no longer gets to drive. And as you walk forward from here back into your relationships, your job, your daily routines, you'll notice something else. You'll be tested, not to punish you, but to confirm you. People will push the old buttons. Life will present familiar temptations to shrink, betray, or perform. But this time, you'll pause, you'll breathe, you'll choose, not from fear but from truth. And that choice is everything. So what now? Now, you live not as a version of you that was shaped by trauma, survival, or social approval, but as a full, integrated, sovereign human being. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't need permission to protect your energy. You don't have to explain your healing, because the you that you've reclaimed, that self is not up for debate. That self is sacred. You've faced the fire and found gold. You've dismantled the illusions and touched the truth. You've looked into your own shadow, and instead of turning away, you said, "I'll stay with you." And that is what changes everything. So here's how we'll end this journey. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be whole. And you already are. Welcome home.